Hey everybody, welcome back to Second Level Questions, and this is the very first episode of the story series. So if you haven't been paying attention, which you should be, the story series is something brand new, and it's where we get to talk about friends that we meet and how they came to faith, and how a lot of times that's not in the way that you would think. And that's important because when we realize that God is working in crazy ways all the time, it opens up the runway for what we believe we can be a part of and what God's doing. So I've got a friend that we met a few weeks ago. Her name is Briella, and this is her story. Briella, thanks for jumping on the podcast.
Thanks, Arin. Thanks for having me.
So we met a couple weeks ago, and it was such like a in passing thing.
Definitely.
Which to me just shows like how cool God is.
Definitely, yeah.
I think Ryan is youth pastor there and at your church, and he pointed you out. You're in your third year of Southeastern University, and you're in Young Life. We love Young Life around here, and we're working in the same area. And I was immediately taken to like how committed you are to students and to your calling. Yeah. So we were calling about how your calling is kind of recent. Is that like the right word you put to it?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely recent.
So we could talk about that story all day, but that's not why we're here.
Okay.
Your friend, Sam is amazing.
She's great.
When you left, because you left the service.
I did.
I think you didn't want to hear me preach or something.
It was exactly that.
I
was just stopping in. They actually told me to say hi to you. They really wanted me to connect with you.
And that was very kind of them.
That was awesome.
And then we drug you here to do a podcast. So
perfect.
Look at us. She goes, Arin, you should hear her story. And so that's why you're here, is because we want to hear your story. So I'm going to learn with everybody else. I'm going to hear. Yeah. So take me back to the beginning. Where did Briella start?
Briella started. So anything about faith started in my junior year of high school. I was 16 at the time. I went to this test-in school. It's called Eastern Tech. And so there were some good crowds there. It was like some focused crowds, some not focused crowds, as you get at any school. But I was 16. I was in sports. I was in soccer. That was like my main focus.
So does test-in mean that you were smart?
It means that I passed a test to get in.
Humble brag?
No, it definitely, if you know the culture of those schools, it encompasses that culture. It's like everyone is super ambitious for the name colleges and like, and just like school.
So what pushed you that route?
My parents.
Okay. So are parents like driven people?
My family is really big into education. My sister's in her PhD program in biomedical, or now molecular biology at Chapel Hill. So they really wanted me to keep going, like scholarly route.
Gotcha.
And so, but at the time when I was in high school, it was a little bit tough at home, honestly. My dad was like struggling with alcohol, and my mom just stuck around and just wanted to love him and like be there with him and not leave. But it definitely made it like a environment where it was super focused on like that situation and that tension. And so
were your parents believers?
No.
Okay, so your parents aren't believers, and you said like your dad's struggling with alcohol significant enough to, like, I caught that little line, like stay around. Like it was significant enough that it was a problem. For sure.
And so my mom, like they both grew up Catholic. So there was a little bit of belief and moral somewhere in there. But everything in my understanding was not like the freedom in Christ. It was rules. It was anything religious.
Sure.
And so definitely it was a problem for sure. And so genuinely I sought after any type of attention, because everything home was attention. Sought after any attention, any validation in like the fun, not focused friend groups.
So you've used the term focused.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Like focused on school.
Gotcha.
So there's groups at Eastern that were really driven and didn't mess around with any guys, any relationships, any type of romantic relationships, like partying, anything like that. Those were like focused people.
Sure.
And then there were some that still entertained the the partying, the like the relationships, the drama.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to like lean into that side. And just I definitely got super caught up in like any type of attention from like relationships, guys, genuinely any type of romantic relationship. I was like just distracted by it. It was like the biggest thing in my life.
What was your type? Give me your type.
My type.
Yes, what was the type? Everybody's got their rebellious stage in their
For
type.
sure. This was exactly it. It was
I dated the pastor's daughter, so
Okay, gotcha.
we're in different areas here.
I dated a lot of nerdy people.
Yeah.
Like really nerdy people.
No, okay, now here's nerdy. Were they focused nerds? Were you taking the good kids and pulling them into the
a little bit. I definitely pulled them, got them distracted, caught up in things.
You were the problem.
I was the problem. I genuinely was. No, some focused kids, because I always wanted to come off like focused to my parents too. And so
they were like your shield.
Yeah.
They're like, they're smart. Yeah. I'm smart. You know,
like they were people that, my parents would let me around. But my focus was on them.
Then you would turn them to the dark side.
Yeah. And I would jump from relationship to relationship. I would like get bored. It was crazy. I would just like be in it, get bored, be like, all right, next. Like I can't even look back at it without being like, oh my goodness, that was rough.
It's so funny to me because when you're in youth ministry like we are, like everybody talks about relationships and parties and stuff like that. And it seems so like a 2008 movie.
Yeah.
Like, oh, the problem is drinking, but the title of the podcast is called Second Level Questions, and so I think something important for us to like talk to students about is the realities of like what that looks like in real time. Because I remember when I was in school, like it wasn't like, hey guys, come to a party at my house on Friday. It was a lot more insidious. That might not be the right. It was subtle. Subtle is the better word.
That's a great word.
Like I found myself. I remember like we'd be hanging out, and then like a buddy just so happened to grab a pack of beers from his dad's house and brings it over, and then another buddy's got this stuff, and like a party just kind of like happened. That was my context, where like we would text, and you text people like, hey, come over, we're just hanging out. And that was kind of the energy. Now, I grew up in Florida. What was the energy in Baltimore? Like, what did that look like for you? And I'm not saying this to glorify that stuff, but for a student who might be listening, who might see themselves in a similar position.
Yeah, I would say it was a lot more sneaky. Especially at the type of school I went to. Everyone's parents that sent them to that school were kind of similar, and like they wanted them to be focused. But like if you had like any type of drug, any type of alcohol, like it was cool to be sneaky. It was cool to be sneaky with relationships. It was cool to just be like in the back of like someone's car and be like, oh, like you have a dab pen? Like, oh, like, are we going to hit that at homecoming? Like, that was the type of thing. And it was...
Jonathan's laughing. He's a homeschooler. He has no idea what that was like.
and
relationships, that happens too. Like, some of the stuff that, like, the stories I hear, the stuff my friends would do, like, I would be driving. Yeah. And, like, my buddy's in the backseat with, like, somebody. And you're like, guys, I'm here. Like, chill out.
Oh, yeah.
Like, relax. But like that's the, like, when you're being you're sneaking around, and there's like an excitement around all that stuff.
Right.
But you don't realize like how much it builds up until it builds up, I feel like.
For sure. 'Cause yeah, the sneakiness definitely like can manifest then later in different ways too. But yeah, it was the exciting thing was like to be sneaky with it. It was just part of it. Like the relationship was fun. The like party scenario was fun, but like it almost was just another thrill to have like a sneakiness behind it too. Like, are we going to get caught?
Yeah.
Are we not going to get caught? And so it was definitely like that type of culture, just like surrounding that.
Okay. So you're in that culture, And I'm assuming that builds up over time and leads us to something else.
Sure. So there's actually a little bit of like a pause in that like trajectory of that story because so in my junior year, we got to Christmas of my junior year, Christmas night. And then my family was driving to an aunt's Christmas party. And I'm in the third row of the back seat, like the third row back seat.
Yeah.
We're driving just normal Christmas night. And a guy's going like 80 miles an hour behind us and clips us where I'm sitting. And so if you saw the car, I can send in pictures if you want them.
We'll post them right here.
Crazy. So right there where there's the big, like it's crushed, right where I was sitting. And that third row back seat, like it's the spot where it was in the car is just no longer. It's totally crushed in. And luckily the back seat stayed intact. And so instead of like my whole body being broken, my head kind of just got smashed in between those two seats, like the second row seat and the third row seat.
You got like pinched.
Got pinched. And so my dad actually, like out of anger, so a lot of everyone else in the car was relatively okay. I was just like in that spot. And so my dad out of anger like broke the headrest off of my seat. It's like nighttime. We're off of the road. We're flipped off of the road. And he broke the headrest off the seat to pry me out before the ambulance got there.
Oh my gosh.
And they took me to shock trauma. It was like my jaw was like dislocated, like completely taken off of my face. My teeth were knocked out. I had like cracks all in my like face. I have about 5 metal plates in my face now. But so I got to shock trauma, and there happened to be a surgeon in town. And happened to be a surgeon in town. Like that was incredible. A lot of times when your jaw is broken like that, you have to have your jaw wired shut and heal for months. And like you'll have a bunch of scars on your face from where they put the plates in. But this guy happened to be in town. He's a maxillofacial surgeon. He's he's world renowned, and he just happened to be in town because it was Christmas, and he was the one that operated on me. And totally, I mean, as you can see, there's not like a bunch of scars on my face. You can't even tell. And he like fixed my face, put metal plates in, saved a lot of my mouth through my mouth. He like made an incision through my eyebrow, saved so much of my face. And genuinely, it was more of just a miracle that like I wasn't crushed in that accident. But
you think about like you could have popped your head like a pea.
Yeah, but I'm alive. Here I am, and
I would never have guessed that you've had massive facial reconstructive surgery.
Yeah, and so like my front teeth are all fake. I actually so this was 5 years ago now.
Okay.
I just this month got my final surgery for the top implants on my teeth.
Holy cow!
It's just been a crazy process. But that was my junior year of high school, and so it pulled me out of soccer, of course.
Yep.
It pulled me out of school,
Mm-hmm.
and that was Christmas 2019. So it was right before COVID too.
Yeah.
So I'm healing. I'm out of school. Healing. I'm home in an okay environment. Like it's tough.
Yeah.
And then COVID shuts down school. Like I go back for maybe 2 weeks after I'm healing. Then COVID hits, and that's when school shuts down. And so I'm just like back home, back out of any connection with people. And meanwhile, all of my like validation, all my fulfillment is coming from like people that I'm just like seeking thrill from.
Yeah.
And so I just like fell into such a down, just genuinely just depressed state. I was just like home in my room all of the time, on social media a ton. And I just kind of chilled there. I was there for like in that rhythm of life because I did online school when COVID hit.
Yeah.
Finished out my junior year till summer. I worked at a marina. Fun fact. Filled boats with fuel. It was so fun. but I was in like a really down spot. And I was scrolling on, this is where the cool part kind of comes in, is that I was just scrolling on social media one day in my room. And slowly I started to get these videos from David Ladding. I don't know if any of you know him.
I don't know who that is.
He was a TikTok preacher, basically.
Okay.
And also you might know of Elijah Lamb.
I've heard
He's
the name.
on the SU now. It was him. Both of those guys were TikTok preachers back like 5 years ago. But what was really interesting is that their theology was more like they were preaching on TikTok. Hey, if you like are truly a Christian and you love your friends, you're being more hateful if you don't tell them about Jesus because you're sending them to hell. It was like a turn or burn.
Fire and brimstone.
Crazy, yeah.
Were they Baptist?
I don't know their background. Yeah, I don't know their background.
They were.
They probably were. They're a lot better now.
Okay.
They're cool now.
Got it.
But it was super interesting. But yet, even with like a crazy theology that none of us would want to preach now,
Sure.
that is exactly the thing that piqued my interest of like, wait, I thought I knew about God. I thought I knew what I believed. Like, I thought I knew the Catholic Church was like, okay, you do these things, you take communion.
Yeah, you do the sacraments.
Exactly. And you go
Do you
to
have
heaven.
Do you have a Catholic name?
No,
Do you
it
have
wasn't. It wasn't.
What
that
do they
Catholic.
call it? What is that? I'm forgetting the name now. You go like when you're like 13, you get
like the first Holy Communion.
Yeah, you have your first communion and you get a new name, and then you get there's something else after that. No, it's not knighted.
It looks like that though.
Like there's another name, but like my best friend growing up, like he was Catholic,
Really?
and so like by the time he was 15, he had 4 names. He was like Jonathan, Patrick, Michael, something Korziak, and like he had like 2 Catholic names.
That's super interesting.
Yeah, so you like add your name. So like Michael was his Catholic name.
Yeah.
Like for the angel Michael.
Oh, right.
I think it was Michael Gabriel. He like doubled down on the angels.
Wow, angels.
Yeah,
He
so.
had a mother praying to angels all the time, probably.
So no Catholic name for
no
you.
Catholic name. Something about Maryland, though, is there's like a ton of Catholic schools.
Yes.
And so a lot of people, like most of the population of Maryland, I would bet like it'd be like, I'm Catholic. They're not Catholic.
Gotcha.
It's like, and I won't say like my mom had great morals. She just was in a tough spot where she couldn't really instill any type of faith.
We call that culturally Christian.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. And so they were like Creasters. We went to mass on Christmas and Easter.
You were a C&E Christian.
Yep.
Yeah, all right.
Yep. And so yeah,
we got
that
an
was
answer.
the culture.
Confirmation. That's what it was. First baptism and then confirmation.
Just forget about that. That was I didn't go through any of that. My dad was like kind of like pushed out religion stuff, and so like it was fine that my sister and I didn't want to go into that, and so my mom was like, all right.
Was your mom like super Catholic?
No, she like, and I've talked to her a lot about it now, which is cool. She had beliefs at the time. Like she was like, she visited churches. She like had some type of faith.
Sure.
But nothing serious enough to like really push forward with.
And I think so to kind of like pause the story for a second and you and I just talk about this for a minute.
Yeah.
I think one of the not issues, that's the wrong word, but one of the gray areas is to realize that people are at some part of that faith journey all the time. Mm-hmm. You know, and so some of us like Christmas and Easter, some like, well, my auntie would talk about Jesus, but like we never went to church, or even people who are like, there was no church in my house. My parents were so against it. Like that's a part of like that is a part of what how you understand God is always forming and changing, adapting and growing.
Sure.
And so it comes from your mom and dad, like their relationship with it informed yours to where you're now you're at this place. You're like, I'm not even sure what I know. And I'm depressed and lonely and isolated in the middle of COVID. And all I got is this TikTok preacher doing fire and brimstone. But even that is enough to light a spark in your life in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
And that's awesome to me, because it's not the typical, like, well, she grew up, but she didn't know. And then she had a moment at the altar at camp and, that kind of thing.
Right.
So you're at that, even those pieces that seem like they weren't the best, like the Catholic and this and that, like God takes those puzzle pieces and works them together. I think it's awesome.
It's incredible. And looking back, I even have a little bit more of like a gratitude for it, because right when I was saved, I always had this view of like, oh, my parents weren't Christian at all. They didn't care about anything. And like looking back, I'm like, well, my mom was just like at a hard spot of her faith journey.
Yeah, that's great.
And like
gives you grace.
Yeah. And it's like, well, and there's no hope in my relationship with her and trying to like pour into her relationship with the Lord now. Like at first I viewed it as like, oh, there's no hope. It's like she was at a crazy spot, and like now like my growing with the Lord can totally pour into and impact her life.
Yeah.
Even though like she wasn't able to maybe pour into it the way she wanted to in her life. And so it's so many beautiful pieces that as you like grow, you just continue to see them, how God's worked them all together. And it's crazy. It's never just the cookie cutter.
Yeah.
What we expect from an altar call or from any moment encountering Jesus. There's so many parts working towards it.
So what was the moment? Like, so how do we go from TikTok to now you were like in this position of like seeking ministry?
Yeah. Man. So that sparked an eagerness for me to just learn what I actually believed. And I'm someone who likes to learn everything for myself.
Yeah, you tested into a really important school.
Right. And
doesn't matter if you were distracted by boys. You're still smart.
Right. I love to like know what I'm learning. And so I remember my mom's friend gifted her a Bible, like as a gift, wanting to maybe plant a seed of some sort. I don't know the whole story, but I remember that there was a Bible in our closet.
Okay.
It was like an NIV woman's Bible that
Yeah, was it purple?
It was pink.
Pink.
It was
women's
pink.
Bible. The only two colors you can be.
Yes, exactly. Love it. And I like dug for it. I found it. And I looked for more videos on TikTok about like how to get into it, how to get into the Bible, where to start reading. Genuinely had no idea. And so I actually started reading in Matthew. Read through some stories. I was like, okay, what is happening? I don't really know. Eventually, I don't know if it was like the same day, the next day, I started reading in Ephesians. And I was like, oh, this is the gospel. Like when I read, like for by grace you have been saved through faith. It's like, and not by your own doing. I was like, wait a sec. It's not by like those religious sacraments that I've learned about. And it was just like, it was just a learning moment for me. That was like, and then I genuinely went back on TikTok, was like searched up more videos about what the gospel was, brought that to, back to like Ephesians, just was in this deep dive mode. And I was like, oh, like I found something where I was like, oh, I should pray now. And basically, I don't know if it was a video, something on like Christianity.com, genuinely all of this. I was alone in my room, just diving into this, and was like, okay, like I need to pray to give my life to this. I need to pray to like be baptized in the Holy Spirit. I saw that on TikTok and I was like, let me pray to be baptized in the Holy Spirit. You found Pentecostal TikTok? Yeah, I did. And it was wild. But it was in that moment that like the Lord encountered me in a way of like, I was enlightened with more than I like was digging into, more information than like, I was like, it came together more than I understood, basically. Like there was just a fulfillment that I was like, wait, this is everything. Like, and I couldn't explain it, which is what like drew me in. Because just like the vastness of something that I couldn't explain, but yet the assurance that I felt, and I was like, what is this feeling? I've never felt this before. And it was like just alone in my room. And then I just kept reading the Bible and wanting to learn more. I read through Ephesians. I think I continued into another book, just alone in my room. And eventually, like, it just kind of manifested from there. So right off the bat, I'm like, how do I approach this with my mom? My first thought is like, okay, this isn't what my family believes.
Which, sidebar, is crazy that, like, as you're developing it, the first thought to someone who's, like, coming to faith in a real way is, how do I share it?
Yeah.
That's you
it's
can preach
crazy.
on that.
Totally. Definitely. Write that down.
Mark it.
Sermon notes. But yeah, but it was more so like, because I saw a lot about boldness of your faith, like that those David Ladding videos were like about like, well, if you care enough, you're gonna share it.
Sure.
And so I was like, well, I want to be bold. I was reading in Ephesians, there's probably something about boldness. And I was like, okay, like I want to be bold. And so I was just like, I thought about a lot how I was sharing it with my mom, but then I was like, well, I want to be bold with it to everyone I know. And it just like kept developing. And so I searched for, like, actually one of the only Christians I knew at the time, like practicing Christians, was my older sister's best friend.
Okay.
And so I reached out to her and was like, hey,
Really?
like, can you take me to church? And that's just
I bet
how
she was doing backflips.
She was. It was incredible. She was actually Baptist at the time. She's on her own now, married now.
On her own. She's on her own.
On
That's
her
crazy.
own. It's great. She's married. She's going to, I don't know if you Lighthouse Church, Glen Burnie. It's a great church. Yeah.
There you go.
But, and so she took me around. We would visit different churches every week. She just totally took me under her arm. And from there, I think I stepped into Young Life. I like invited myself to the Perry Hall Young Life.
Sure.
There was like some kid that I was actually dating. I knew that he had gone to this Perry Hall Young Life before. And so I just showed up. I didn't ask him. He never invited me. Yikes on him. He was a Christian.
Yeah.
Didn't invite me to Young Life.
Realistically, though, we were talking about this morning, actually. Like, I think for Christians, sin is such like in the forefront of our mind, but sin is just a distraction from our calling.
For sure.
Right? Like we are called to be prophetic. We're called to be inviting. We're called to be engaging. We're called to be out with people, helping share. Like, he's dating you.
Yeah.
And didn't invite. Like, what are we talking about?
Yeah.
You know, but I would imagine, like, if I just look at my own life, I look with students that we work with, there's probably in the back of his mind this running dialogue of like trying not to sin, trying not to be bad. And you're so busy trying not to be bad, you forget to do good.
Yeah.
And you forget that the whole calling that you have is like you have, and he doesn't know that you're going through this radical life change. And he could have been the catalyst.
Right.
And he, like, it's not trying to, what was it? I won't ask his name, but like, I'm not to poop on whoever this guy was too bad, but like the blessing of his faith, like how much his faith could have been like encouraged and inspired, and he didn't quite get it. But you invited yourself.
I invited myself. And it was a great spot for community. And if anything, that is the thing that made me want to lead. It was like a lot of the people there that I was like, oh, like no one was as passionate about scripture as I was. 'Cause like, I just had this growing passion for like, I just want to learn more, because anytime I learned a little bit, there was something more that I just didn't know. That's just how diving into scripture is. And so I just continually like wanted to learn more and more and more. And no one I met was like that. I was like, we're in church. Like,
that's crazy.
What? And so I just wanted to like encourage people. I wanted to bring that to people. And so rather than Young Life initially just being like where I found community that loved Jesus, it was more of what led me into like, no, I want to lead this. I want to be a part of leading this.
Yeah, you're like, move over, guys.
Yeah.
You guys are not getting it.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah, exactly. exactly. It was just
So is this still on
fire.
the back end of your junior year?
This is in the summer after my junior year.
So you have your whole senior year still ahead of you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, I went back to my senior year. I'd started with Young Life. I found some freshmen that were Christians. Like, I didn't know anyone that were Christians. Maybe like my one friend, Sophie, she was great. That also went to Young Life. I met at Young Life. But genuinely at Eastern, she had to do an internship her senior year. We couldn't do a club. At Eastern, there was like no one that was Christians. I found some freshmen after I started this club called Christian Fellowship Club. I was just started something. I had a feeling about a teacher right when I got to Eastern after I was saved. I was like, this lady's probably put worship music on in the morning. I'm going to ask her to
She's
to
giving
sponsor my
worship
club.
music
Yeah.
in the morning.
Yeah. And she did. And I was right.
Some would say that was the Holy Spirit.
It probably was. She was incredible. And she sponsored my club. She like was the supervisor for my club. I started with some freshmen.
To anyone who's trying to start a club, this girl got saved, sanctified, spirit-filled, and started a club in the time that you probably are planning to go to camp.
Yes.
Just kudos.
Just go to camp.
Just
go to camp. But it was just like, it was a fire. It was like just an ambition that was just right off the bat. And I just leaned into it. That was the only thing I knew to do. And so she sponsored my club. I like led my first little thing there. And she actually totally spoke over my life. She was like the first person that spoke over my life. Like, Briella, like, do you do this at your church? I was like, I don't even have a church. Like,
I'm still hopping around trying to find one.
Yeah, exactly. And she's like, oh, Briella, like, you got to stick with this.
Yeah.
And we did a club like every other week. It was kind of disorganized, but I wrote a little lesson plans and didn't know what I was talking about. But our last meeting before I graduated was like 30 people.
So cool.
It was incredible. And like, so Eastern Tech, one of those magnet schools, is a lot of like Muslim, a lot of different religions.
Sure.
And so it was really crazy to like have a group that just wanted to come together like that. So it was an incredible pathway and totally like fired me up for anything else I wanted to do with leadership.
It's so funny because like your answer, you kind of answered a bunch of questions just in the way that you pursued God. Because I know a lot of people, well, how do I know what church to put them in? You were like, I just went looking for churches. Well, how do I know like what to do with the I just started a club. Like, well, what do I do in my club? I mean, I'm disorganized, but we did it.
Yeah.
You know, and you just like, you took what you had and you just did the next thing. Like, well, I started in Matthew. I didn't understand what it was. And then I got to Ephesians and I just kept reading. And then, you kind of, like you said this assurance. I had this assurance that I couldn't describe. And I love that because that's that blessed assurance that we talk about in Scripture. And, you know, Scripture talks about like peace that surpasses understanding. Right. And there's a part of our faith that is internal, that is like, you can't make it up. It's your experience with Jesus. Absolutely. And if you've had that, the practices make sense. Like praying and reading and worship and all those things are they make that thing go. Right. If you haven't had that though, which is like, I don't want to speak for your mom or anything, but like if you grew up in like a religious kind of mindset and you haven't had that moment with Jesus, then all of those practices seem like ritualistic, or they're just like things that you do. Right. But the fact that your story, you were like, I had a moment with Jesus. Yeah. And it started on TikTok. Yeah. And ended with 30 students my senior year at a campus club and is still going. Yeah. That is who God is. And that's so cool. So how's your mom doing?
Now, so my dad actually passed from just very recently this past summer from his struggle with alcohol, like complications, what turned into like liver and kidney failure. And that was this past summer. So it was, my mom had a lot of hope. She really thought he was going to make it, and he didn't. And I genuinely, like, I knew that the Lord could save him, and the Lord could, like, work a miracle. But for some reason, I just knew that, like, this was going to come. Genuinely, I grew up to be pretty independent because I knew that, like, this would kind of come. And so I had this coming. My mom didn't. And so it kind of like rocked her world recently. But it's let her take a new approach on, like, herself. She felt like really limited by, like, my dad, and just like him not wanting anything to do with religion, him kind of shutting her down, pretty, like, verbally abusive type stuff. And so now she's kind of, like, finding herself. And it's kind of cool. Because I just get to have conversations with her about what she's discovering. She's in therapy, and she's really growing. And she's had moments here and there where she's talked about the Lord, and it seems like it's becoming more and more real to her. I don't know if she's had a moment, but it's definitely becoming more real to her, which is cool to be alongside her with.
I'm believing that's coming.
Me too.
Big things are coming for her. How did you feel like your faith informed that, like, grief process with your dad?
I had this knowledge that it was coming for all of my life. Like, genuinely, I feel like I knew, like, a lot of my life felt like preparing, like, getting really good at life and knowledge and being independent, because I knew this was coming. So
you're like, it's gonna end in one way.
Right. Like, when you're young and you're, like, taught about alcoholism, like, you're taught, like, okay, if this continues, it will end in death.
Sure.
And, like, that's all I knew. And so I'm, like, seeing it continue my whole life, worse in my whole life. I'm like, okay, this is how it's going to end. And it was never, like, an emotional process for me. It was all just, like, A plus B equals C. Sure. And same for my sister. So neither of us have been as shaken by it. But, like, just my consistency for my mom has definitely just been the thing or, like, my consistency in faith and in my logic behind everything has, I think, just spoken through. Genuinely, for me, the grieving process didn't look like a grieving process, which I think confused a lot of people. But it's very strange. It was simply just because that, like, I knew it was coming. And it was crazy. It was so crazy to be, like, the person of faith that in my family that was, like, I did readings at the mass for my dad, like, because there was, like, a mass instead of a service after the funeral, and, like, pray, like, they would always have, like, a chaplain kind of dude come in, like, in the hospital, but, like, my mom just had me pray for something like that. Just, like, it was the craziest experience.
You could be a rock for her in these situations.
Yeah.
So can you speak to, like, right to the camera on these ones?
Sure.
I have two questions to kind of close this up.
Yeah, sure.
You had every excuse in the book. Like, trauma from the crash, dad wasn't a believer, was far from it, hindering your faith. You get saved by yourself, no one to help. You don't have a church. You had every excuse in the book. So can you speak to just, like, the general student, like a believer?
Yeah.
And what's the difference? Like, what set your journey apart? Why didn't you take any of those excuses?
When everything felt like it was pressure on myself to get things right, to succeed in life, to be good, the glimpse of something greater, that it wasn't in my hands, it wasn't my responsibility, changed my perspective on everything. And having something greater that, like, was just fulfilling, like, and just, like, with me, and there was just a supernatural sense of that, that was all I needed.
That supernatural sense, that feeling, that moment, I can't describe that well. I haven't met anybody who really can, but I recognize it in another person. Another person recognizes me. Have you found that? Have you felt that? Are you better at describing it than I am?
I don't think so. I've tried. I don't think so. That's the best way I've been able to describe it. It's just something greater, something bigger than I can wrap my head around that is there.
So when you're sitting there reading Ephesians,
yeah,
and you're having these like moments of conviction, that's what you're feeling.
Yeah.
Is you're feeling this like there's something bigger, and this, what I'm reading on this page, is real. I can sense that
exactly
inside.
Exactly.
And then I did hear a pastor say, like, when your soul finds its creator, it feels its completion. Mm-hmm. And like that feeling I cannot replicate. But once you get it, it leads you to what you're talking about, where you're like, it was the main thing. Mm-hmm. Like it wasn't like an additive thing. It was the thing. Mm-hmm. And I think when people like yourself who have a different story, it's not like I was raised in church and I grew up. It's almost easier, I feel like, for you to jump there because you have to give up other things. You're like, well, no, I'm going to choose this now. Where when you grow up in church, you can kind of play I'll juggle both. So when you made that decision, what changed? Like, what were this is the second question. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah. What were the differences in your life? And was it different enough that other people realized it, or was it kind of subtle?
No, for sure. It was because of how I was seeking for validation in so many people. Like, that was already, I was seeking for something. And so then good, yeah. That validation was just now coming from everything that was so sure in the Bible. My friend Sam, like when I was a little bit earlier on in like my Christian faith and we would talk about our struggles, I was like, Sam, like the Bible says it, just do it. Like I had and she like, ouch, Briella.
You were like, I tested into a smart school and I'm telling you, this is the answer.
Exactly. And so everything, okay, now I understand that there's a lot more nuance in the Bible, but everything just seemed so black and white. This is what it is. Like we have confidence to approach the throne. Like we are called by name. Like you have a specific calling and the Lord chose you. Like that. Like everything that was so black and white to me was everything that I just leaned on validation wise. It was like I didn't need anything else. And that just gave me so much boldness that it absolutely carried over into like people did notice it. It was a switch. I was like genuinely an anxious person before, and it just switched into this confidence that I ended up like exes that I had like would DM me about like, hey, I'm thinking about faith, like what is this? And like I've seen that you embody it, and so and they would just ask me questions about Jesus.
You almost became that thing you were hoping to find in Young Life,
right?
Where you were like, does anybody else believe this? This is awesome. This is great. And you're like, wait, why aren't you excited? Yeah. Like you become that thing.
Exactly.
I love telling students like, because they're like, well, I don't know what I want to do. Like, what does God want to use me for? And I go, what do you wish someone else was for you? And like be that thing.
Oh, that's so good.
Like start there.
That's so good. Yeah.
And like if you don't do anything else, see what God does with that. Yeah. And I think that's what you did in Young. You were like, okay, love you guys. Yeah. I'm going to teach now. Exactly. Exactly. I don't know how this is going to work. And then God used it. Like you didn't go to Bible school. You didn't do all of this like. You didn't have to be anything more than you were. And I think that's the beautiful part of God is he calls us to be so much more than we are, but he still uses us as we are in the moment. There's this weird dichotomy with how that works. And your story is such an amazing example of that. And God is still fleshing that out, and you're called to ministry. So is there anything, podcast, like we said, is called Second Level Questions. Sure. Is there anything that most people might miss when we're talking about how people are coming to faith, that you're like, guys, I want you to know this.
Mm.
Like, take this away.
I would say that we often search for people who are seeking out something in a specific way. But genuinely, and especially with our and younger generation, every single person is seeking for something in some way.
Mm.
You just have to find where they're seeking. I actually heard it put a really great way from an Alan Hirsch sermon. It was called Keys to the Heart. And it was like everyone like has a key to the heart. Some people like are seeking at like a strip club. Some people are seeking in alcohol, but some people are seeking for something and expressing it in art. Like some people are seeking for something and like just going through the motions for their job and earning money because that's where they find value. But everyone is finding their validation and their fulfillment somewhere, and that's where they're seeking for something greater. And as people walking with kids, we get to find that. We get to like build relationships and find that, and that's where we can just ask God, like, where do you want me to bring redemption to this? And we can like bring it to where they're seeking.
Everybody's seeking. I love that.
Everybody's seeking.
Everybody's seeking, and God sees that, even when we don't see that. So where are people seeking in your life? You might not know, but start with the first thing that comes to your mind.
Yeah.
Because you never know, someone might see it on TikTok and radically get a life change. Briella, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your story. And we will be praying for your mom to come to just continue her journey, and that God would continue to draw close to her.
Thank
Guys,
you.
this is Second Level Questions. We'll see you soon.